obviously, this film has been probably from the terms of perspective of just purely VFX and SFX, one of the most talked about productions this year. I would say up there with Dune and New Planet of the Apes. It's a pretty impressive combination of groundbreaking and old school. So, before we really get into some of the specifics of the designs you both put together, I'd love to know a little bit about what some of the early conversations were with the team behind this project, kind of what they told you about what they wanted Alien Romulus to be. Did Fede know from the start he wanted this to be very practical heavy? Tell me a little bit about that thought process.
Well, for me, I was the first HOD brought on, as is often the case these days, because the first thing you have to do is break a script down and start the bidding process so the studio can get a handle on the budget and how they're going to break it up. So my first conversation with him is like, yeah, he wanted to go old school. He wanted this to feel every bit like those other two films, and he had this vision for it that I was hooked immediately. It got me excited, and I like to say we didn't use one technique. We used them all. We used all of them, and every amazing artist that we could get our hands on and join us, and they all felt every bit as passionate as he did. He was kind of infectious that way, and yeah, it was his vision from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think I went and met him at his office, and cool space that he had, and he had all these he had like a cool old TV, maybe a top loading cassette deck, and he had all these VHS cassettes of old movies, and he was like, "You worked on that one, you worked on that one, you worked on that one." And I thought, man, this guy really knows his stuff, and I was familiar with the Evil Dead movie, and I knew that he was, really very much into the practical. But the first meeting, I was mostly just listening to him, talk about, the world of Alien and the films and things that he admired about them, and maybe some things that didn't work as well, and that was a very interesting meeting. I came away maybe not exactly like I didn't necessarily have a sure handle on like when the movie was going to start production and stuff like those details, but I came away. I think Rodo was there, his co-writer, and I thought these guys they really have a very interesting story, and they're very Fede's a very interesting choice of director for this, and I was very excited about that, because the idea that maybe we get a visceral alien film, and which we haven't had in a while, and that was very exciting.
All right, so we end up spending most of the time on this location, this two-halved space station called the Romulus, and it's itself a nice mixture of practical and CGI. Alec, would you have worked at all on the design of the spaceship, or were you more limited to the creatures and machines? No.
I was strictly creatures, and specifically of the creatures, I did the chest burster birthing sequence, when Isabella gives birth to the egg, and then the opening, the flowering egg with the little embryo in it. Those were my areas. And then Legacy did Xenos and the puppet aspects of the Rook, and Weta did the face hugger. So it's sort of that was Fede's dream team of creature effects people, practical.
Got it. Well, okay. So Eric, then why don't you tell me a little bit about designing the Romulus itself then?
Fede worked with Alex Nice and I apologize for forgetting the other guy's name. Two amazing concept artists, and early on, before we all left for Hungary to start pre-production, we'd go to his office, and he had these guys in his office, and production designer, Nathan he'd come in, and he'd just kind of start riffing with the guys, and the guys would start doing all kinds. I mean, he had so many different designs going, and it was really driven by Fede kind of looking at it and saying, "No, I need more of this, I need more of that." And it took a while to get there, and even to the point where the wonderful thing about Fede is he's a Renaissance man. He kind of does a little of everything, including 3D. So he'd say, "Well, just give me the file and let me play with it." And he's a 3D Studio Max master. And so, he would do previs shots, he would design camera moves, he would do compositions, he would play with the models, and then give them back to me and go, "Okay, now, peace be with you, give it to whoever needs it now." And that's our starting point. And so he did a lot of that with the concept artists. He was really involved. His fingerprint is on pretty much everything, from what I just described to even puppeteering, Rook in some cases. I don't know how much he helped with the chest burster when he could, or he was involved with everything. The face huggers, puppeteering them. He was like a kid just having the best time ever.
All right, well, you guys have you've both mentioned Rook, so I guess we might as well go ahead and jump into that because, certainly one of the most talked about aspects of what you guys put together here. Was the plan from the start to recreate Ian Holm?
The original script, it wasn't the Ian Holm likeness, but that quickly changed. Fede came up with the idea and pitched it, and I was like, "Well, that's genius." But then I was like, "Well, how are we going to squeeze that into everything else we have to do in budget and time?" And I love being pushed. It's certainly more exciting than just going through the motions of something you've done before. It makes you excited to get out of bed every morning when you've got a challenge. But this one really wasn't challenged because he wanted a puppet. He wanted an animatronic that worked. He was so enthralled with the Alien 3 Ash puppet that if they could do that back then, certainly we could do something much much better now. And Legacy uses a lot of the same tools we use in visual effects, 3D CAD and in construction, all the engineering. They did a phenomenal job of the mechanics behind their animatronics. All started in CAD, and then they would print and build the materials. So you should talk to Shane about it, but they were a little shy at first because of the time they had to build it, and certainly I don't think we really gave them the time they would have liked to build the puppet. But because they had to sculpt the likeness, there had to be permissions given from the family, and then they had to go and they had to get it ready for principal photography. Like I think they had 8 weeks, which was pretty tight. But they did a killer job, and they showed up, got underneath desks that had to be sawed in half and shoved them underneath in hot conditions, miserable kind of, and they just had fun knocking it out. And then in visual effects, we knew that we knew the mouth would never enunciate the way a human mouth would need to enunciate, and we knew the eyes were going to kind of work. And so initially, Fede felt, he was very familiar with the kind of deep fake technology. He'd run his own tests himself. He'd build his own models. And, he says, "Look, maybe we just do the eyes and we do a little bit of the mouth." And so went through some phases of how we were going to go about from the puppet to something a little bit more like Ian Holm, knowing that it's not supposed to be the same character. It's another version of that robot on a different station, and it's gone through hell. So it's busted up, it's broken, it's imperfect, it's got acid that's eaten part of its face, and to embrace maybe some of those imperfections. And he talked about different things he could do with the voice and stuff, but ultimately, as we got a little closer to the likeness, he kind of pushed us more and more toward trying to make it as much as like Ian Holm as possible, using those techniques.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly a showstopper in there, and it's I would say it's tied up with one of the other sequences people talk most about, which is what I want to hear from Alec about, which is basically immediately after we meet Rook, we have our big chest burster rip scene, and you have this cool addition of the 3D scan of the 3D X-ray of the the body before the creature bursts forth. So, Alec, tell me a little bit about putting together that sequence.
Well, that first shot that you described, which I'm a huge fan of, is actually a visual effect. And it has a very palpable look to it, which Eric can speak to, but it looks like the real deal to me. When I saw the shot, I'm like, is that like, did somebody build a torso and did they comp that? Eric, you can tell me how you guys did that.
Well, yeah, there was a digital torso built. We did some in our post viz to get the director's cut together. We kind of riffed with Wiley and Co about what it could look like. Fede always had this idea that it's kind of a bright light behind your finger. You know how your finger glows like a bright red orange if you got that strong light. And so that was the first kind of, okay, we'll start there. And we did a mock-up for the director's screening and then handed that idea off to the ILM team in Sydney. And they did build, the human anatomy and got the light to kind of move it through and kind of permeate. And then I think they have a making of just showing how the layers go together. But yeah, that all came from, I think, Roto and Betty's imagination. And then we had to figure out how to get it done with the time and money we always have. But I think it worked pretty good.
Great shot and a great lead in to the to the sequence. And in talking to Fede about how the chest burster, how he wanted to see this chest burster sequence go, he made it clear that although we all love the explosive quality of the very first chest burster, that's very much like what had been done in the past. We did a surgery scene in Alien Resurrection where her chest is cut open and they extract an embryonic face hugger chest burster. But what he wanted was like a slow birth, more akin to like a human baby being born, or we were kind of talking about tiny kangaroos that climb up, in and into the pouch, out of the birth canal and into the pouch, stuff like that. So that's when I kind of realized, oh yeah, this has got to be on another level than what we have done in the past. So that meant that the puppet had to be more responsive and puppeteerable. The materials had to be, more lifelike and squishy. And then he threw a curveball at us and said, and I want it to be darkening. I want the body to start darkening as it goes. And to which I said, oh, well, that should just be a digital effect. And he was like, no, you need to do this. It's practical. I'm like, oh, okay, got to figure that one out. And what we came up with ultimately was two different scale sizes of a chest burster. The 1-to-1 scale that worked with our actor Aileen Wu was, the body was about like that. And then the double scale size one was larger, and that enabled us to put more mechanisms in it, snarling lips and, some little bladders here and there, and the color changing effect that happens underneath its dome. And I should mention also Ivan Poharnak from, I believe his company is called Film Effects. He did a bunch of the human gore stuff. So he created the chest piece that breaks open, and he did the double scale chest that our overscale chest burster worked within. And that was all shot in the cockpit set of the Corbellum, which was a very, very cramped space to work in. And, we had to
super cramped.
Yeah.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. It was like, it's like a 2-seater. It's like the front of an SUV, or something. And we had to cut a hole in the decking and, fit Aileen down under the floor so this fake body could be attached to her. And then we had puppeteers everywhere. We stuffed them under the floor. We had them off screen in the, back in the hallway. It was just like everything, just enough room to get a camera in there and, a couple of little lights. And so it was very challenging, but ultimately it was very claustrophobic and real. And that is where Eric is correct, where Fede jumped into puppeteer with us. He loves playing with things, and he was operating functions on the chest burster, and he also was giving the directions while we were doing that. And one of his directions, as it came out, was, now look up at mama, like you're exhausted. So the creature is sort of like, we did this sort of rhythmic breathing, and then it looks up at her. The skin had to peel back. That's in this sort of birth sac. So we just wanted to give it as much personality and performability as possible.
So how did you actually get the darkening under the skin?
Well, that was I was kind of noodling that around in my mind, thinking, well, the adult has a clear dome, and normally the chest bursters that have been done in the past are sort of all one single kind of yellowish, tone. But that transparency is not there. And I thought, well, that's a place to do it. And do you remember those masks that were popular a while ago, where they were like a double layer of, like, there's a skull mask and then there's a clear vacuum form over it?
Yeah, and you could squeeze something and blood would come down.
Squeeze bulb, and they had like oil in it or something. So I'm like, well, how about something like that? So we played around with it, and it worked, and it worked very well right out of the gate. We had to figure out it had an intake and an in port and an out port, and we found that we had to fill the whole thing with water. It was just a really thin, like less than a credit card thickness of space, and then we could inject. Hey, look at that. we could inject the black fluid, which was literally just acrylic paint mixed with water. So we could kind of suck it in and out, and we could even get like a undulating kind of feel to it. And we could make it white clear, and then bring more. It was really a lot of fun. It's in the film, but it's sort of like you feel it when you know it's there. It's always like, our bench test stuff is always like, wow, blows your mind. And then you get it into the cockpit and you have like flashing, almost stroboscopic lights, and you realize, oh, that's not going to show. That lighting is killing the effect.
Yeah.
But Fede's great, because you could just say, like, hey, listen, here's the issue. And he's like, oh, well, I'll bring the camera around, to the front so that it's being front lit, and we'll see if that works, which worked. And also shout out to Aileen Wu, who was so patient with this, because she came in a day or two, to get it all set up, to help us get it set up, and then she endured it during the actual shoot for a few hours, and just sold it, as did Isabel. So it was really a lot of fun, and it was a really a very nice experience, because Eric, was that one of the first creature effects that was shot?
It was pretty close, because we had shot some of the facehugger stuff before.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. That's true. But it was just very nice to be like, we were an ensemble, all us creature guys, Weta, Legacy, and myself, and I was reconnecting with Shane Mahan on that film, which was just really awesome. And then we do our effect, and you never know how it's going to go, or you bring your own perceptions to things. And then, but everybody was like, I was standing next to Eric and Steve Aspel, and from Disney, and Fede, and it was just like everybody was so happy with it, that it was really like we were just like walking around on air, and it was really a very, very nice experience.
It sounds that way. Okay, so Eric, you just shared something on your screen. Was you trying to tee up a particular sequence you wanted to talk about?
Well, I was just trying to give you the illustration of what Alec was talking about with the liquid flowing through the head. I put together a keynote for a DGA talk, and I happen to have that. It's all Alex stuff, but I just had it handy.
Got it. Okay, well, that scene you pulled up, I think, was that in the zero gravity space when it's that shot you had instead of, because it was what I saw wasn't the baby creature. I saw a full-grown one
Oh no.
snarling at her
Uh-oh.
face. Um,
Uh-oh. Sorry. Hold on.
well, no,
Hold on.
that's
Maybe
the,
I'm
I
let
guess
me
if you want to show it to us, that's fine. But
sorry. I
if it
thought
is
this
the
was what
zero
sharing.
G, I want to ask you about that.
Oh
Okay, so
yeah.
that's cool. No, that's not what I saw last time.
Oh, apologies. I was trying to support what Alec was talking about,
Oh
so it kind of
yeah,
made
that
sense.
is too cool. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you see, we had these veins sculpted into it. Those were hollow channels, so that as it went, maybe there would be some anatomy that would be showing. There's bubbles in this version. We were able to figure out how to debubble it. But
Man,
yeah,
that is
pretty
awesome.
fun.
That is
Yeah.
too cool. Well, I just
It's a
asked you.
shame because we had so many great shots. You never know what's going to go in the edit, but there were definitely shots we got where this effect was amazing.
Yeah.
It was incredible on the day because of how, from my perspective as the visual effects supervisor, I'm always worried about how much I'm going to have to work, fix, replace, etc. And part of that is we have budget and time considerations, and when we take on more work than we had originally planned, obviously that affects overall work, or the studio has to give more money, or they say no, you can't have that. And so when you show up on the day and these guys knock it out of the park, it just makes us all so happy and it looks great. And then we don't have to spend time and money. And ultimately, they all enjoy doing it. Fede gets really what he wants. And it just creates an energy that we're all bringing to the game every day to make this movie as seamless as we possibly can, where you don't know when we're switching between a CG Xeno or a live Xeno, or when we've augmented some of these amazing things they've done, and just to help it feel like the Back to the Analog Future, as I like to say, is like those first two films.
Mm. No, I mean you guys nailed it in terms of the creatures and the effect world. You got me curious though. You showed what I think was the zero G sequence, and now I want to ask you about that.
Of
The
course,
so tell me about that where they're trying to dodge the acid as they float around. That's a great set piece.
that I can't tell you the number of conversations we had about that one. That was actually one of the reasons I started so early on the film, because once I met with Fede and he wanted to bring me on the film, I met back with the studio. Said, look, he wants to have you on. When can you start? And I think they wanted me to start a little later, and I immediately said, look, there's two zero G sequences in here that those are going to be incredibly difficult to shoot and plan. And if we don't start planning for those now, we won't be ready because there's so many other things we have to plan for. And at the time, because Rook wasn't Rook was a normal character, I felt like the zero G would be the most difficult to pull off. Little did I know that he had other things in store, but so the studio agreed, and I started with the previous team and started working with Fede to go, okay, how do we shoot it? Because the problem with zero G, especially if you're going to shoot it here on Earth, is it's hard to make gravity go away. And when you put an actor on a harness with pick points, even if they've
Just one
trained,
second. Just one second. I need to
sure.
keep going.
So even if they've trained, if they don't have a strong core, the shots can't last very long before the audience can see where they're pivoting. And as soon as you see they're pivoting, it gives the way the gravity. You know where gravity is, and it doesn't look like they're floating. It looks like they're on a wire. And as soon as you see it, the illusion is gone. So part of planning that sequence was to figure out what do we want to shoot, what do we need to see, and then how do we create the illusion. The simplest way to describe what we did is we created two sets for each of these, the elevator sequence as well as the zero G acid sequence, and we created our normal horizontal set where we could do pick points on the actors, and then we also created a vertical set. So we create the same set in pieces vertically so we could pull the actors up. So the way the sequence is cut, you don't know which set we're on as we're cutting back and forth. And that creates the gag of you never know which way is up because they're rotating one way, the next shot they're another way. And we had wind constantly blowing on Rain's hair, not unlike what Jim did with Sigourney, when she comes out of the elevator that was kind of like, look, her hair is blowing everywhere. Why don't we just do that so you don't get into CG hair? And then we'd add little CG particles floating around to help the illusion. So and in some cases a CG rain or a CG Andy. The elevator sequence had the same thing. We had a 2-story vertical set, and then we had a 5-story horizontal set. And then the stunt team would run them through the set on rigs, and then we would add stuff, Atmo and other things to it to help again that illusion. So pretty much, and all those were all ideas we all talked about around tables with the other HODs and how we're going to build, what are we going to build, and how to shoot it. But ultimately, every technique was used, including full CG pieces in some cases, full CG Xenos, full CG Rain and Andy, and then it's constantly cutting back and forth.
I mean, it's remarkably well done sequence, and as you both said, it's seamless. Last moment, I want to ask you both about birthing the humanoid xenomorph. So that one, I'll start with Alec here because he said that was one of his key practical moments.
The Isabel Merced giving birth to the egg, after getting the black goo. And that was a really sort of like a classic gore moment, right? Like, and Fede was on main unit, we were on second unit, and Pedro Luque was the second unit director. He's a buddy of Fede's from years ago. They go back a long ways. And he's a great guy. And so we would shoot this stuff, and Fede had a monitor from elsewhere that from main unit, and he's watching it, and they were talking, and I could hear Fede just like squealing. He just loved it, but it was like just more blood, and I really want the blood to arc over the top of the egg. So we had 2 fake legs that Ivan Poharnak and his team had made, and we were puppeteering our egg. Our egg had bladders in it that would like pulsate and undulate and open, revealing the kind of the yellowy birth sac inside. But man, it was so hard to get that blood. We were arranging the tube because it kind of like, the egg is shaped like that. So if you're hiding a tube, it's hard to just get it to beautifully cascade over the top. It would sort of go to the sides. But we finally just like jammed it up as far as we could, cranked the pressure up all the way, and just blasted it. Soaked the camera a couple of times. There's some angles you won't see, by the way, in the film because they're just too like it's like blood. Coming straight at camera like a train. And then after that, the egg gets carried and dropped in a on the floor, and it starts to open, and that's when it reveals that it's got this sort of baby engineer inside it, and it's filled with the acid blood. So that acid blood had to kind of well up, and because it's going to be used, in a couple of minutes to help, kill off the offspring. But that was all, it's a lot of stuff like a guy standing under the floor in the hallway, right? He's holding up the egg, and he's got to like puppeteer it so that it tips, and like, is it going down like the Titanic, is it doing that? But it's all, somebody holding it and being very uncomfortable underneath the floor. There was some cable removal and motor removal, I believe, that was sitting on the deck.
We did some extensions and added some
you guys
acid stuff
and facial expressions
a bit.
Yeah, and that's very exciting to me. I love that kind of overlap of, get something in camera that looks cool, and then you can go back and you can add those little nuances to it that take it to another level.
Oh yeah,
it was so great to do because even though there's so much was perfect in camera, Fede would go, what if we did add a little of this, or let's add some of that, and it helps it cut. When you put it together editorially, maybe some shot had a little more practical smoke, and the next shot, it's a little clearer. So we would do constantly tweaking and just trying to get it to all sit together. And Fede would want something maybe a little more gooey or more little movement. And because we had such an amazing foundation, those things just go by unnoticed because it just feels like it's all there. And I think that really helps it. So the basis of the practical work is fantastic.
And we don't like, when you're visualizing things and you're planning, you're building, my work is happening months in advance of the shoot. And then you get it on set and you get everything you can get. But what the digital allows us to do is continue, as filmmakers, continue thinking of the nuance and the what ifs that Eric mentions. And that's how Fede's mind works. So it's really nice that it isn't just like in the old days, it was closed off. Like all you had was editing, you can cut the shot a little shorter to get yourself out or leave it long to leave something in. But you didn't have the options that you have now for enhancement and further storytelling. So that, I think, is why, this is a very exciting era to live in and to be working in, where things are really, truly working in tandem now, which is beautiful.
Well, gentlemen, I think we're about out of time, but thank you both so much. And, I can't wait to see some more of those behind the scenes featurettes, because I know there's so much, great work from the rest of this ensemble as you talked about. And it's, it sounds like we might be getting yet another Alien film. So hopefully I see you both back and see your work back, expanding and having more fun within this universe.
I think we'd all love that. It was so much fun for, I think, all of us. It was like a kid in a candy store watching it all come together in editorial, and Fede had such a vision and push us. And, that then rolls downhill to all of our amazing partners, and they just all stepped up to give us the best work they could. And it was a very modest budget and schedule. And
like 70 million or something, it looked like.
A little bit more than that, but it doesn't look like that on the screen, right?
No. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. Obviously, why does a film that's relatively modestly budgeted look better than some of the stuff that costs 250 mil, right? But it does. It looks great, and you guys are very smart with how you made the budget run. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.